Grace and peace. I want to give everyone time to get in. We've got a lot to cover today. I am Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson, and I welcome you to our weekly Facebook Live discussion, Shatter the Silence. I'm going to give you a few minutes to come on in. Grace and peace, it's Apostle Cheryl Richardson, and I'm going to give you all a few minutes to get in. We are continuing with our weekly Facebook Live discussion regarding domestic violence. It is our mandate to raise awareness. Hi, Andre. And to just make people more sensitive to how prevalent it is, how damaging it is, and just how pervasive it is in society as a whole. And so, although this broadcast originates in the United States, where we have a tremendous problem with domestic violence, what we know is that domestic violence is an incredibly huge issue globally, worldwide. And so we're not in a position where we can point fingers at third world countries and say this is a problem that they have, or it's only people who are uneducated who have this issue, or it's people who are not stable financially that have this issue. But what we know is that domestic violence is a scourge on society, and it affects all of us across socioeconomic lines, across racial lines, across religious lines, denominational lines, all of these categories that we use to separate ourselves from one another and to distinguish ourselves from one another. It affects all of us worldwide, okay? And according to the United Nations, the deadliest place for a woman is in her own home worldwide. The most dangerous place for a woman is in her own home. Not while she's visiting someone else's home, not while she's on vacation, but while she's at home where she should be safe, okay? We know that anyone can be a victim, and we know that anyone can be an abuser. All right, anyone can be a victim and anyone can be an abuser. So today's session, and please share, because I'm really not good at remembering to say that, but please share. Today's discussion is going to focus on a particular domestic violence case that I found incredibly disturbing. And although all of the instances of abuse are disturbing and all of them are horrific, this particular case addressed so many of the things that we've been talking about since we began doing these discussions 2 or 3 months ago. And it encapsulates so many different things. It touches on the fact that anyone can be a victim. It touches on the fact that anyone can be an abuser. It highlights the fact that anyone with a high educational level can be a victim. Anyone with a high educational level can be an abuser. Someone who is financially stable can be a victim. Someone who is financially stable can be an abuser. All right. We know that women can be abusers as well as men. That 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced serious domestic violence beyond emotional abuse and verbal abuse. But abuse that has escalated to physical abuse. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced this or will experience it in their lifetime. So that is how pervasive it is in society, right? There is nowhere that we can go. If we're in a group of 4 or 5 people, 6 or 7 people, one of us has either experienced domestic violence or will experience it in our lifetime. Okay, so it's a serious issue that we have to get ahead of. The other thing that this particular case addresses is the privilege oftentimes that is extended to people who present as having been successful or who have done a lot of good, right? It highlights the fact that it's a really a bad issue in churches, because in this particular case you have clergy and bishops and apostles coming forward and speaking in support of the abuser. All right. And so it's almost like a good old boys network. It is. And the more that you have accomplished in society, by society's standard, it's almost like the victim becomes, a serious punishment becomes negotiable. Almost. It's like, if I do a lot of good in the world, I can do almost anything and it'll be excused. The problem that I have with that as an apostle in the Lord's church is this. When we assume that position, what we are doing is deciding that the victim's life, we're assigning a value to it. And how do you do that? We're assigning a value to what they have suffered. We are assigning a value to the post-traumatic stress disorder that they most likely now have. We are assigning a value to the loss that they have suffered, that they will have a very difficult time recovering from. Emotionally, financially, in terms of employment, etc. And so who are we to decide that because this individual has done great work, and because they came from humble beginnings, and because they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, and because whatever they've done to you as a victim is excusable or can be mitigated? That is a horrible thought process, but this is how we function in society today, and it's wrong. It is wrong. Now, I don't expect people to do cartwheels and be excited about this case study, but we're doing it anyway because it needs to be done, okay? In this particular instance, we're talking about Judge Lance Mason and his wife, Aisha Fraser Mason. Let me give you a little background about them, okay? Aisha Fraser was married to Judge Lance Fraser from 2005 to 2015. So that's 10 years. So married for 10 years, and they have two children, two girls. One, Audrey, who is about 11 years old, and then another daughter named Ava. Audrey was born with special needs, okay? Now, Lance Timothy Mason is a former politician, government official, judge, and convicted murderer who served in various offices in and representing Cleveland, Ohio. As a judge, he served on the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas. He was a member of the Ohio Senate representing the 25th District from 2007 to 2008. Regarding his education, he attended the College of Wooster, Shaker Heights High School, and the University of Michigan Law School. Okay, let's see. Now, let me give you a little bit of information about Aisha, because I want you to be able to envision this couple and their accomplishments, the things that they were able to accomplish, all right? I want you to be able to get a feel for them as people. So regarding Aisha Fraser, she was an only child and a 1991 graduate of Shaker Heights High School. Hey, Jason. She attended Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, or FAMU, in Tallahassee, Florida, and earned an MBA and a Master's in Education from Ursuline College. This occurred before she became a teacher in 2002. She worked in business. So she worked in business before she became a teacher. She'd been a teacher at Woodbury Elementary School for 16 years, and her students loved her. Her co-workers loved her. She taught history and math to 6th grade students. 16 years, okay? So that's a dedicated, devoted teacher, right? She's married to Lance Mason, who is a judge. They're married for 10 years. They have 2 daughters. The oldest one has Down syndrome, okay? And I'm detailing this so that you can understand the stressors that were present in that relationship in the first place, okay? So she's a teacher for 16 years. Hey, LaTanya. And if you do anything dealing with other humans for 16, 17, 18 years, you love people, because people will work your nerves, okay? But by all accounts, she loved what she did. Her students some of which have gone on and, they're in high school or graduated from high school, talk about how she always made them feel welcome, how if they were having a rough day in the classroom, she would let them eat lunch in her room, with her. So she was very nurturing, it seems, and very supportive. And she seemed to be like very, very patient from everything that I can learn about her. All right. So she's the only child of her parents. And she's nurturing all these other children. And I think that's just really, really amazing. Okay. Now, I told you about his history. I told you about his accomplishments. So he was a politician. He had represented the state. He was a judge, which means that he sat on a bench in an elevated position and made decisions about what punishment others should face. What was the likelihood that they could truly be rehabilitated? And the irony of this is just mind-boggling. Mind-boggling, okay? So he's a judge, he's a politician, he's well-respected, he's a go-getter. I mean, you have to have a lot of drive, right, to accomplish what these two people accomplished in life in terms of just their careers, okay? Now, back in 2014, there was a domestic violence incident involving Judge Lance Mason and Aisha Fraser. And at this time, they were together. They were driving in the car. He was driving. She was in the passenger seat. And their young daughters, were in the back seat of the vehicle. They had been separated for a few months. Okay? So they've been separated for a few months. They are driving together. It seems that they were going to a funeral. Lance Mason indicates that he had prayed for his family that morning and they were sharing a vehicle. So he decided that he would pick them up to go to this funeral, that was not the original plan. So he picks them up to go to this funeral. It seems that he talked to her about reconciling. And she reportedly said to him, Lance, I want you to get counseling before we get back together. At which time he proceeded to punch her with his closed fist while driving and their daughters in the back seat approximately 20 times. He then grabbed her hair, back of her hair, slammed her head into the console, the center console in the vehicle, at least 5 times. She was able to get away from him and get out of the car. He then proceeds to crawl across the middle console and straddle her in the street and continue to beat her in her face. And said something along the lines of, your life is over now. All of this with their children watching. This is a judge. This is a judge. This is a person who is respected by society, who has their ego stroked all the time, who people do what they tell them, right? And they don't have any recourse unless they go to another judge to get them to overturn what the first judge said. So there's a lot of power and authority just contained in having that position. And there's a huge amount of ego that often accompanies any position in which you have that kind of power over the lives of other folk, okay? So he's still this well-educated person, right? He's still all of that. She gets away from him. He drives off. Now he's got their daughters in the car and he drives off. A good Samaritan, I'm sure she freaked them out with her face beaten the way it was, helped her. All right. Now, when I'm done with this discussion, I'm going to post links. So I want you to come back. After this is done, because I'm going to post links so that you can see these things for yourself. I want you to know I'm not making this stuff up. Not making it up, okay? So I'm going to post the actual links where you can click on the link and hear these things for yourself. All right? So this is back in 2014. So then what happens? He's arrested. And when he's being arrested, the police are confused about what's going on. Because he asked him, is my wife okay? And they're like, what do you mean, is your wife okay? The police were called to his home because he was threatening suicide. He was threatening to kill himself. And he had weapons in the home. So they're responding to that. They don't even know yet that his wife has been beaten the way she's been beaten. Okay? So they're coming for one reason, and then they get a call on the radio that something else is going on and that his wife had been beaten and she was on her way to the hospital. So they apprehended him. They picked him up for that. In this video, you can see her blood splattered all over the front of his clothes. And he said, well, I was going to kill myself, but... Okay. So he was going to kill himself, but he somehow magically, mysteriously managed not to kill himself. He nearly killed her, though. Okay. So fast forward, it turns out that he fractured her face in several places. He broke her orbital socket, which is the socket right this under your eye. Okay. Literally, he broke her face. She had to have reconstructive surgery. He also bit her. He bit her. He hit her with a closed fist 20 times. Then he smashed her head into the center console of the vehicle. Picture your own vehicle. And envision your head getting slammed into that with great force. Then he straddled her and beat her some more in the street and told her, well, your life is over now. All because she said, I want you to get counseling before we get back together. Okay. And honestly, it wouldn't have mattered what she said. There's no justification for what he did. There's no amount of stressors. There's no amount of I got dropped on my head at birth. My mother was this. My daddy wasn't there. There's no reasonable explanation for that conduct, for that behavior. And it kind of gives you a glimpse of what she may have been dealing with beneath the surface. Why a separation was necessary in the first place. Okay. So that's that backstory. So fast forward to court. This is what I find particularly disturbing. And the reason that I chose this case to do a study on is because it touches on so many things that we've been talking about for many, many weeks now, right? You had clergy lined up. You had a courtroom packed with people. And you had clergy stand up and sing his praises and talk about how amazing he was and how much confidence they have in him and how sure they are that he's learned from this experience. And I'm watching this and my heart is breaking because I'm wondering how Aisha Fraser must have felt with all of these powerful people, politicians, Marcia Fudge, who was considering running against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House. I mean, we're talking about powerful people here, standing up, writing letters to the judge, talking about how amazing he is and how much good he's done in the community, as though that should mitigate his punishment for shattering his wife's face, biting her, beating her, straddling her, and beating her some more in front of their minor children. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It's just disgusting. It just is. Okay. Something that the Lord impressed upon my heart years ago regarding how I may feel about anything personally. No matter how I feel about a thing, right? I don't have a right, and this is before I was even affirmed an apostle. I don't have a right to decide, for example, that Jason, which you've suffered, is not important enough and this person should be excused for it. I don't have a right to do that. LaTanya, I don't have a right. I don't have a right to decide that I like this person so much and I think they're so amazing and they've done such great things for society that whatever they've done to you is negligible. I don't have a right to do that. God has nothing to do with that. And it's disgusting to me that there were that many clergy that could stand up and have that conversation on tape. Okay? And so I wonder, because this was her hometown, so I wonder how outnumbered she felt and how powerless she may have felt. Okay? And it's heartbreaking to think that she suffered through all of that. And then everybody rallied to him to support him as though he were the victim somehow, because he's done such good in the community. So then her life, her sanity, her physical health, the mental health of their children that's all negotiable. Okay, you can tell I feel very strongly about this. It's wrong. It's just wrong on so many levels. And I hate that she experienced that. So, he was convicted for domestic violence. And of course, he said all the right things. And I want to quote a couple of things that he said. And then I want to reference the cycle of abuse and how it typically goes. Let's see. Oh yeah, he tried to choke her too in the car, but I think she got away from him. Want to make sure that I'm giving you accurate information. He essentially received a slap on the wrist for what he did. And this is after the judge gave a long speech about how no exception should be made because of the position that he was in, that he needed to be viewed the way other people are viewed. He was ordered to take batterer's intervention training. He was ordered to avail himself of counseling. All of these are all things that he had refused to do previously, right? So he was convicted for domestic violence, okay? He made this little speech at his sentencing where he says, I accept full responsibility for what I did. There's no justification for what I did. I'm going to try not to be emotional, but I can't promise. But I'm not trying to get sympathy. It's really heartfelt. The damage that I did to my wife and to my children, is inexcusable. There's no excuse for it. There's some tears. He dabbed his eyes a little bit. I'm here to be punished today. I know that what I did was wrong. I have fought against this type of brutality my entire life. And I can't believe that I've conducted myself this way. Okay. Let me just say this. Standard abuser commentary when caught. Standard. There's nothing new and exciting about that speech. There's nothing new and exciting about it. There's nothing new and exciting about it. Everything that he stated was obvious. There was no revelation embedded in it whatsoever, okay? You shattered her face in front of your children, okay? You left her for dead in the street. Okay, so just. So he was sentenced to 2 years, which is still a slap on the wrist. Okay, still a slap on the wrist. So he was sentenced to 2 years. He only served 9 months. Because, of course, when you go to prison, if you do what the judge has said and you go to counseling or whatever, you can shave time off, right? You can shave time off of your sentence by being good. Okay, so he wasn't a street gang member, right? He wasn't in organized crime. So how much trouble was he going to get in prison anyway? Okay, if anybody on here has been to prison, you feel free to chime in. A person of that temperament, you're attacking someone who's vulnerable to you. You're not going after anybody that's a match for you. Okay, let's just be real. You're not going after anyone who might really beat you back. You're not going to do that. You're going to be quiet and be a model citizen and be manipulative. Okay, so now, as a therapist, I can tell you this. When people are ordered to go to some kind of a treatment, most of the time it's not effective. This is based on my 30 years of experience treating all kinds of patients, okay? When they are ordered, it becomes a task that has to be completed. So now, not all of them, but most of them are just checking off a box. They're just checking off a box. I have to go to this many sessions, check. I have to say this in the session, check. I need to give an indication that I'm not suicidal, check. I need to give an indication that I'm learning something, check. If I can write a great essay, that's a plus, check. It's all check boxes. It's all check boxes. It's not internalized because they don't believe they need it in the first place. Lance Mason is intelligent, bright. He's a judge. Bright. Genius. Okay? Knows what to say. He's a judge. He knows what he would want to hear, right? If he were sitting on the bench listening to this case. What are you looking for? You're looking for change. You're looking for an acceptance of responsibility. Okay. And the acceptance of responsibility doesn't do anything for the victim. It makes us feel better. It makes us feel better. Because then we don't have to believe and accept that we are looking at what we are actually looking at. Okay. So ordering someone, that's fine. Every once in a while, I've had patients who are ordered into treatment, ordered to have sessions with me or whatever. And every once in a while, it would be genuinely impactful. Most of the time, they were just checking off boxes. Okay. And my summary would indicate they have technically met the requirements of the court order. However, in my professional opinion, they have failed to internalize blah, 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 as evidenced by blah, 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 blah. Okay. So now we're speaking to the integrity of whoever's doing the evaluation and their willingness to tell the truth and not sweep over it and not decide in a vacuum that although this person has committed a horrific crime, I like them and I think they're nice, and they seem to be responding great to my wonderful counseling ability, so therefore I'm going to declare them healed and send them back out into society. Okay, and that happens more often than it should. I'm not sure that that's what happened in this case, but I can tell you about what happened after, that whatever he pretended to get out of batterer's intervention was a lie. Okay, all right. Now, fast forward to once he's released from prison. I can't even imagine after 9 months. The judge indicated that Aisha had stated in court that she had suffered PTSD, that her life had been changed forever, that her children would forever be impacted by, the events that they have witnessed, and she was concerned about them in regards to that. But it was also indicated that she did not protest his release from prison early. Okay. Let me say this about that. That is not unusual. That too is part of the cycle. Because when you have a 2-income household, right? And he got paid really well. He was a judge. And I'm sure she had a reasonable salary too. She was a teacher, right? But now you lose his income. Now you lose his income. It's just gone. It's suddenly the income is just gone. So now she is struggling to support her children, maintain a household, etc., on one salary instead of her salary and his salary. And so the judge indicated that Aisha was not adverse to his being released early because she needed the help financially. Okay, so those of you who are abuse victims can identify with this, right? When the abuser is removed from the home, it does have an impact. It has an impact emotionally. There's the chemical thing that's going on in your brain. It's like you're going through withdrawal. You want them around. You can't stand them. You love them. And then there's the practical. Who's paying the bills? How are we going to keep food on the table? How are we going to keep the lights on? How are we going to keep the water on, right? And so she was not adverse to that so that he could seek employment and help in the rearing and the providing for their children. So there's nothing unusual about that. And I think anyone who is educated about domestic violence needs to take that into consideration. That the victim is still reeling from the abuse that they have endured. And if they have post-traumatic stress disorder, that even intensifies it more. Okay, so how much weight can you put in? Well, they don't mind. They don't even know what's best right now. Okay, so that's the other issue with this case. So he served 9 months. He got out. I mean, that's not even half of the sentence. That's not half of the slap on the wrist sentence. He didn't even serve half, okay? He served 9 months. He got out. Then he's hired by the city of Cleveland to be the minority business development director, making $45,000 a year, which I'm sure is nothing compared to what he had been making. But the idea that now he's working in government is appalling now. So Cleveland has this program called the Second Chance. And Mayor Frank Johnson stated in an interview with a reporter, he defended that they hired him because everyone deserves a second chance and no one should be defined by one mistake. Here's the issue that we take with that statement. When we do that, we are appointing ourselves God. And now I'm deciding that no matter what horrific act this person has inflicted upon another human being, that should not be held against them, that should not define who they are. Okay? I wouldn't have a problem with that if you were taking that person home with you. Take them to your house. Let them loose around your children. Let them sleep in your guest room if you have that much confidence in them. Okay? And so we get all deep and mystical and we get all, prideful about how we giving people a second chance and, people aren't always the act that they have committed. He did not serve half of his sentence. Okay. Now here's the other thing that's interesting. I've been researching. So the application for that position, the mayor states that Lance Mason applied for the position with like 16 other applicants. He was the best qualified. Duh, he was a judge. I mean, come on. I mean, how many people with his level of education is going to apply for the Minority Business Development Director position? How many? Okay. Most of the people who apply for that position were probably trying to elevate their position in life, right? So the mayor says that Lance Mason was the most qualified. Here's the interesting thing about the application. There's no question on the application, according to news reports, that ask if you are a convicted felon. I've filled out quite a few job applications in my time. I've never seen one that didn't have that question on it. Have you? If you've seen a job application that does not ask you about an arrest history or a felony history, please chime in, because I've never seen one. This one doesn't have a question on there. And the rationale is, well, if they did have it on there, applicants would lie anyway. Well, is that not reason for termination if you lie on an application? So I'm confused. Okay. So if you're going to lie on an application, that means you're not accepting responsibility for something, which means you probably shouldn't be working in a place that is founded on integrity or whatever. And if the way that you screen people to come in to get a job is to not even ask, now you're deciding that everyone around them gets to be exposed to whoever they actually are, and they don't even know who it is. And they don't even know what it is. And they don't even know what they're capable of or anything. Now, am I saying that we shouldn't have reentry programs? Am I saying that we should not give people a second chance? That's not what I'm saying. I've hired people who were convicted felons, but I also did thorough background checks. And if it was a violent thing, I did not hire them, because I don't have a right to expose the other people who work for me to a temper that you seem unable to control. I mean, I don't know who we think we are. So anyway, so he was hired into that position with a domestic violence felony conviction, having served only 9 months of a 2-year sentence. Okay? Fast forward to November of 2018. It seems that Aisha was taking the girls to her sister-in-law's home. That was the agreed upon drop-off point so that she and Lance would not have to interact with one another, I guess for visitation with his daughters. According to the prosecutor, he attacked her from behind and he stabbed her. He murdered her with the children present, and she died in the driveway of her sister-in-law's home. This is the same man that gave the very flowery, tearful speech about how he was accepting responsibility. This is the same man who started a blog while he was in prison talking about how his experience has taught him so much and he's a changed person and has made him a better parent. Better parents don't escalate from almost beating their spouse to death in front of their children and escalate it after attending batterer's intervention counseling to murder, to stabbing, which requires an up-close personal interaction. So he stabs her to death. And on the tape, you can hear his sister saying that he's hurting her. I think he's hurting her. I might hear her screaming, so she calls the police. The kids are witnessing this. And then he comes back in the house and says, "I'm so sorry, she's dead." Here's my question as a therapist, as an apostle, as a domestic violence advocate, as a woman with just basic common sense. How could anyone not see this coming? How? Okay? And so I wonder, as an apostle, I wonder as a minister of the gospel, I wonder as a therapist, as a parent, I wonder how those people feel who lined up in that courtroom, who packed that courtroom back in 2015 and testified on his behalf and gave these glowing statements about, how reformed he was and how much he had done for the community. How do they feel now? Because Aisha Fraser was stabbed to death by the same man that almost beat her to death just a few years later. Just a few years later. Okay? And it's just, this has got to stop. This has got to stop. Red flags all over the place. But what gets in the way of addressing these things effectively is when we decide as a society that what the victim has suffered can be mitigated by the fact that we approve of the good deeds that they have done. And we don't have a right to do that. We don't have a right to do that. And there's nothing right about it. And I expect a whole lot of people to be upset with me about this, but that's okay. That's okay, because I'm not taking it back. This case to me was heartbreaking. So you have a child with special needs, and you have a child who's like 8 years old, and they witness their father brutally attack their mother. I'm sure something happened in that home before that. They probably witnessed that too, heard that too, observed that too, been exposed to that too. Why did he even have visitation? Why did he even have visitation with his children? I can't imagine that they weren't terrified of him. I cannot imagine that they were not terrified of him. And I don't care if the visits were supervised. You beat my mother nearly to death. I don't want to be in a room with you by myself. Okay? I mean, it's just, what are we doing as a society? What are we doing as a society? Who are we serving? You know, I think it makes us feel better if we can look at an horrific act and find some good in it. Sometimes, people, sometimes, it's just all evil. It's just evil. That's what it is. This concept that everyone has good in them is not biblical. The Bible says the complete opposite. We're all a hot mess when we get here. And it's in establishing a right relationship with the Lord that is cleaned up in us. Okay? So, hi Pam. So it's important that we stop making decisions that make us feel better. I would be mortified had I been one of the clergy, or if I had been a therapist, or if I had been a politician that stood up and advocated for this man. Okay? And then even after he murders his wife, the mayor justifies his hiring, saying he applied for the job, he was the most qualified. Okay? He's a judge. Of course he can read contracts. Okay? But there's no consideration given. Okay? We're more interested in being able to say that we helped somebody reform than to look at what they have really done and what they have unleashed on society. Okay? And so she's dead now. And so an entire school community is doing without a teacher who made an amazing impact on the lives of children for 16 years. And her co-workers for 16 years at the same school. Okay? And they don't have the ability to learn from her and to be nurtured by her. Her daughters don't have their mother anymore, and they also don't have their father anymore. Okay? So he initially pled not guilty, which is what most criminals do. You know, I've talked to a few of them, and they said, well, you always plead not guilty because then you have room to negotiate, right? You can feel out the lay of the land, and you can make a strategy for either, you know, making a plea deal or whatever. So everybody pleads not guilty most of the time, right up front, just to buy time. So he pled not guilty to murder, okay? Domestic violence. He also, when he killed her, he then jumped into an SUV and tried to speed off and crashed into a police cruiser that was responding. He crashed into a police cruiser and injured the officer, who then had to take time off from work and who also had to be in the hospital because of his injuries. So he injured a public servant. He murdered his wife in front of his children. Exposed his sister to that horror because she's watching from inside the house and she's the one that had to call the police. And it's just mind-boggling that this woman is dead. Why? Why is she dead? Why did he have access to his children after what he had done? Why? They will never be the same. And then my challenge to people in a position of authority is this. When you make decisions and you declare the person healed or delivered or set free, do you even have a dog in the fight? Is it going to affect your life at all? Are they going home with you? If you feel like they're reformed and they're no longer violent, or they're no longer a pedophile and they're no longer a child abuser, are they going home to you with your family at your house? Or are you sending them back to somebody else? So we can make these decisions in a vacuum, but then we don't have to deal with the consequences of what we have just decided. Okay? And for this reason, throughout my career, those of you who know me know I'm serious about this. I am not getting on a bandwagon. I don't do bandwagons. I think for myself. I consult the Lord and I say what he tells me to say. And people can like it or not. It's okay either way. Okay? Because what I can't deal with personally is being responsible for someone dying because I needed my ego stroked. And I needed to feel like I was giving somebody another chance. At whose expense? At whose expense? Okay? So, later on, he changed his not guilty plea. He changed it to a guilty plea. And this is what I found interesting. He did not want to change a venue. He said, I wish to accept responsibility for my actions. I don't want to prolong things and hurt my family or Aisha's family more than I have. Okay, that's what he said. He went on to state, there is no way that I was going to let my daughter testify. There is no way that I was going to let my daughter testify. Now, what is compelling about that statement is, even the way that it is phrased, there is no way that I was going to let my daughter testify. Because she would have had to testify that she saw you stab her mother to death. Okay? So you're not going to let that happen. As opposed to saying, I did not want my daughter to be put in a position where she would have to relive or recount what she witnessed. It was more like, I wasn't going to let her say that. More like, I don't want to hear her say that. So again, just very, very self-centered, very narcissistic, very, very self-serving, okay? So, he had been charged with 1 count of aggravated murder, 1 count of murder, 1 count of felonious assault, violation of a protective order, grand theft, felonious assault, and he was told that he would have a mandatory 5-year supervision if he was ever released from prison. And he would have to register as a violent offender. Okay, now, he's not been sentenced yet. He just changed his plea to guilty a few days ago, about a week or so ago. But his sentencing is going to take place on September the 12th at 1 p.m. Okay, he could get a mandatory, he's facing, let me see, make sure I got this right. He is facing a mandatory life sentence. He could get a minimum of eligible for parole in 20 years, or he could get a maximum of with no parole. Okay. The prosecution says that with his plea of guilty, they did not make any deals with him. They did not drop any of those charges that he was charged with originally, that they were not even willing to consider it due to the egregious nature of his actions, and the impact that it's had on society and on the community as a whole and his family. And so they didn't drop a charge for him to plead guilty to save to save the state money and all that. They said, every single charge that we have charged him with, we are leaving on the table. We are not willing to negotiate at all. Okay. And this is really what needs to happen in all DV cases. This is what needs to happen. Okay. In all DV cases. All right. So, sentencing is on the 12th at 1 p.m. And the prosecution says it is his intention that Lance Mason spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. That's what he's going for. That's what he's hoping for. That's what he feels needs to happen. And so I appreciate the position that the prosecution's office has taken on this case, because enough is enough. It appears that Aisha did not have a whole lot of support. The powers that be all lined up in his favor. They all got mesmerized by the good that he has done in the community, by the fact that he pulled himself up by his bootstraps and made something of himself after coming from nothing. Okay? And that outweighed what he did to his wife and to his children. And so now his children have to grow up without a mother who was really loving and nurturing, having witnessed what he did to her repeatedly, how will this affect them for the rest of their natural lives? How? We know from previous Facebook Live discussions that children who are exposed to trauma, especially to this extent, tend to then go through life looking for the next person that's going to hurt them. In the church, we would call this a generational curse, right? I mean, this entire case is so disturbing to me on so many levels. It's like the system failed her, the clergy failed her, the politicians failed her, the judge who signed off on his release from prison at 9 months states that she is devastated that it's turned out this way. That the victim, Aisha, was not adverse to him being released. What we have to understand is that is typical trauma decision making. That is typical. It's typical. An abuse victim has lost the ability to discern what's best for them, at least in the short term, because of the hormones crashing around in their brains. So to ask a trauma victim, do you think this person should go free? All right? Do you think this... They don't want to be mean. If they're a nurturing person naturally, if it violates their core values, if the chemical balance in their brain is off track, which it is, we talked about a few weeks ago, right? About how the hippocampus, the ventral precortex, all of these regions in the brain literally change their ability, their volume, they shrink, depending on the amount of trauma that you've been exposed to. So with their shrinkage, there becomes a decreased ability to discern past from present and to make sound decisions. And this is why victims need a support system around them. I cannot imagine how she must have felt in her own hometown, where she's also done a lot of good and where she also had a stellar record, where the decision was made, it appears almost unanimously, that what had happened to her did not matter. It didn't matter. Okay, so her children don't have either one of their parents. It's just, we have got to do better. We have got to do better. I am trying not to cry right now. I'm so upset because why? Why? And so here's my challenge to everyone who's watching this today. Share. People are going to get mad, but I'm a big girl. I'm good. Okay, I'm good. Do an introspection and think about the decisions that you make in your day-to-day life. And think about the times when you decide that someone should be forgiven or someone should be let off or their sentence should be mitigated or it shouldn't be held against them, and that we all make mistakes. And then ask yourself this question. Can that person that you are willing to give this new chance to, can this person come to your house with their violent temper that's been left unchecked? Can they come to your house after they've beaten somebody's, literally broken their face in front of their children? Do you understand how beating her is one thing, and that's horrible, but in front of his own children? I mean, so yes, grace and peace, Ron. Hey, Pastor Joni, listen. Do people deserve a second chance? Sometimes no. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't. Okay? Sometimes they don't. And I'm going to say this. Church folk, clergy members, we have done a horrible job of vetting people and determining who's safe to even be in the church and who needs to go sit on the back row somewhere until they decide they really want to know who Jesus is. Okay? We've got all of this stuff running rampant within the church. And then we feed our egos by declaring someone reformed. But they're not going home with us. We declare them reformed, right? And we send them back to whoever they've been terrorizing. We declare them reformed, and there's no real accountability. Nobody's telling them when they're wrong, okay? We declare them reformed, and because I'm a therapist, if they say what I need to hear, right? There is no discernment about if they mean it or not. No discernment. I remember years ago, I had a patient. I was a director of a program for juvenile delinquent boys. And I mean, they were gangbangers. One of them, two of them had robbed an armored car. I mean, they were, I'm not talking about they were just skipping school. Okay. They were hurting people. Okay. And one of them had repeatedly been stealing cars. And although I was the director for all of the other therapists in the program, I also carried a caseload. And so he was on my caseload. And I remember watching him, and I remember God telling me he is not ready to go. But the way the system was set up, if he attended X number of classes, X number of sessions, didn't get in fights, blah, 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 did his chores, whatever, right? Then he could technically graduate the program. Okay. I had a talk with him and I said, you have technically met all the criteria, but you haven't changed. You have not changed. Oh, Miss Cheryl, yes. I said, no, you haven't. I'm looking right at you. There's nothing I can do about it. And that breaks my heart because you're not ready and society is not ready for you to be back out there. Okay. So I could not stop his release because by law, he had met the criteria. Okay. But this is what I did do. I documented a lengthy note in which I outlined my concerns that although he had technically met the criteria, in my professional opinion, he had not internalized a cotton picking thing. Okay? And that's what I wrote in his note. And he said, don't worry about me. I'm going to be fine. And I thought, no, you won't. You won't be fine. I mean, I knew it was just like, there was nothing I could do about it. Okay? Within 2 weeks of him graduating the program that he never internalized, I got a phone call that he had been in a car accident, that he and a family member had stolen a vehicle, the same thing that he came to us for, right? And had run into the back of an 18-wheeler because they thought the police were pursuing them. Okay? Decapitated him. I will never forget this boy. Decapitated him. Broke my heart because I knew he was not ready to be out there. And although there was nothing that I could do about it because by law he had met the very weak criteria that he needed to meet, he checked off all the boxes. Checked off all the boxes. I got dressed to go to his funeral. I couldn't even go. I couldn't go. I could not go because he wasn't ready to be out there. I knew he wasn't ready to be out there. And I'm grateful today that God gave me the courage to say it and to document that he's not ready to be out there. Okay? And he died doing the same thing that caused him to come into contact with us in the first place. What am I saying? I'm saying, I know I'm a good therapist, okay? But I don't have a magic wand. And a person has to be willing, truthfully, and honestly to accept responsibility for what they're doing. And they need to walk it out. And they need to follow the rules. And they need to not continue to hurt people. And so when we decide that this person deserves a second chance and they just... am I going to be handcuffed to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Am I going to be affected by the fact that you are reformed or really not reformed? Or am I unleashing you on somebody else who now has to put up with you, harassing them, bothering them, tormenting them because I thought in my infinite wisdom that you were ready, that you were healed, and that you were delivered? I think that we are oftentimes arrogant. I think that we are full of ourselves. And I think that we need to stop. Tell the truth. And then ask yourself, why do I need for this devil to have a halo? Why do I need to make this evilness positive? Okay? There is no silver lining when you beat somebody in the face in front of their children. Okay? Everyone's been damaged by this. My heart breaks for her parents. She was an only child. Their children don't have a mother, and they've got these horrible memories about their father battering their mother and then stabbing her to death in front of them. Which, by the way, is a very personal way to kill someone. That's very personal. You got to get close to somebody to stab them to death, right? You cannot do that from a distance. And then his response is, I'm sorry, she's dead. He comes back in the house. Then he tries to run and he crashes into a police officer. Just, what are we doing? What are we doing? Okay, and so I say this, and I want you to think about this. Whatever your station in life, whatever your position, wherever you work, whatever it is that you do you even talk about domestic violence? You know, we mentioned a few weeks ago that there are certain things that no matter what area of the vineyard we feel we are called to, no matter what part of the vineyard that we feel that we are passionate about, that God has ordained us and anointed us, there's someone in your corner of the vineyard that is affected by domestic violence. I guarantee it. It may even be you. I guarantee it. Are we talking about domestic violence? Are we talking about human trafficking? Are we talking about suicide among clergy? Are we talking about murder-suicides? Are we talking about these things? Are we educating people about these things? Or are we just saying, oh, that's just such a sad story and going on with our life? Okay? My challenge to you, especially if you are in a position of leadership, if there is anybody on this planet that listens to the words that come out of your mouth, okay, what do you really know about them? Are they ensnared in a human trafficking situation? Are they ensnared in a domestic violence situation? Are you paying attention? Do you even know what to look for? Do you know what to say? Do you know what not to say? Okay? And if you are one of those people who feel like you have to come to the aid and the defense of the downtrodden, okay? Are you even asking how they got down there in the first place? And has that situation been resolved? Or am I unleashing them on society to continue to hurt and damage people? Why am I defending this person? Why do I feel so passionately about it? Is it about me and my stuff, or is it about them and their stuff? Is it because I feel like maybe I was wrong, that no one gave me a second chance? And so now everybody who's been accused of something, I'm going to come in on my stallion and save them? Am I looking at these things case by case? There is absolutely no way. It's mind-boggling to me how the whole entire system, how the church, how the law, the courts, failed her. Completely failed her. Completely failed her. I don't think I'll ever forget about this case. I don't think I'll ever forget about it. Okay? Now, when we're done here, I'm going to come back on and I'm going to post some links because I want you to understand that I'm not embellishing anything. I'm not making any of this up. You can see it for yourself. There's the 911 call when he murdered her, and you can hear him say, "I'm sorry." You can hear him say, "I'm sorry. She's dead." That's what he said. "I'm sorry. She's dead." There's the video where he was arrested and had her blood splattered all over the front of his clothes, and he said, "Well, I was going to kill myself, but but he didn't." Right? There's him in court accepting responsibility for his actions after he battered her, right? And he later went on to murder her. And so this case addresses so many things that you're not necessarily safe because you have a protection order. You should have one, but it doesn't guarantee your safety, number one, because he violated it, obviously, right? That a victim often will take a lenient stance when it comes to the abuser for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's the chemicals in the brain talking. Sometimes it's practical things like, I can't pay the rent, or I can't pay the mortgage, or I have children to feed. Especially if you've been out of work yourself because of your injuries, right? And so all of these dynamics, if we don't get a handle on understanding what these dynamics are, right, we will continue to make foolish, dangerous decisions. Okay? Foolish and dangerous decisions. There is nothing normal about being able to beat someone that you are supposed to love in the face till you literally fracture their face. The mother of your children, in front of the children. There's nothing. That's sick. That's sick. And 5 minutes in batterer's intervention is not going to fix that. There's something else going on there. Okay? As evidenced by the fact that it escalated to full-blown murder. Once again, in front of his family. In front of his babies. In front of his daughters. So I feel badly for her family, and I'm praying for them. And for her students and co-workers, people whose lives she has impacted in such a positive way. All right. And if you are a victim, understand that you cannot listen to you until you have been away from that joker for a long time and your brain has been able to recover from what you have experienced. Okay. This is why it's important to have a support system. It's important to have a support system that is familiar with domestic violence and the dynamics that are involved in it. Because just going and talking to your pastor, just going and talking to your prophet or your apostle who has no training in this, they're going to fall back to scripture. Be forgive. Yes, God has forgiven you. And they said they're sorry, so you have to accept it. And all of that is the complete opposite of what needs to be happening. Okay? And so I challenge those of you in a position where people are submitted to your voice to stop sending people back home to their death. Stop sending them back home to be slaughtered out of, your own need to feel like your counseling is effective. Okay? Sometimes, and I'm a skilled therapist, sometimes it just won't work. It won't work because the subject of the counseling doesn't want it to work. They're not interested in it working. They like the way it's already working. Okay? And if we're not able to accept that and declare that that's what we're looking at, we are setting people up to be injured and to be killed. Okay? So it can't be about us. It cannot be about us. And I'm telling you, I've referenced that individual, that young man that died. They had to close his coffin because he was decapitated, because he ran into the back of an 18-wheeler, stealing a car. And here's the sad thing. The car had not even been reported stolen yet, and the police were not, in fact, even pursuing them. They saw a police car, and they thought that they were being pursued. And they sped off and hit the back of this truck, and they were not even being pursued. Okay? Now, did I do everything that I could do to prevent his release? I absolutely did. And I told him to his face, you're not ready to be free. You're not. Miss, you'll be fine. You're not ready. You've not changed. I'm looking right at you. You've not changed, okay? I don't know how I would have been able to process even his death had I not been honest in his discharge paperwork. If I had written a flowery summary about how much progress he made and, how he was so much better, I would never have been able to forgive myself. And so what am I saying, beloved? We can't always impact the outcome. Okay, because we all have free will. We all have free will. But we need to be able to say that we spoke truth to power at the end of the day. That we told the truth. That if someone's not ready, they're not ready. If they're not healed, they're not healed. If they're not delivered, they are not delivered. If they are not set free, then they are still bound. And us calling them free doesn't make them free. Okay? So we've got to be more accountable, and we've got to be more responsible for releasing people back into society, sending folk back home to the abuser, and all of that. We've got to do better. We have got to do better. This woman should not be dead. She should not be dead. Okay? So even now, as recently as a few months ago, the mayor of Cleveland, Frank Johnson, made a statement to the news. Okay, I'm going to post that link too. He made a statement to the news that there was no way that this outcome could have been predicted. There's no way that former Judge Lance Mason brutally murdering his wife could have been anticipated. I look at this track record and I wonder, how in creation did anybody think that this would not happen? How? Just given the brutality of what he did to her back in 2014. We're not talking about an argument because she burned his eggs. We're not talking about he cussed her out or called her out of her name. We're not talking about he stormed out of the house in a fit of rage and drove around for hours. He beat her repeatedly, right? hit her 20 times with a closed fist. He didn't slap her. Attempted to choke her, okay? Slammed her head into the console of the car with their children in the back seat 5 times, shattering the bones in her face. She had to have reconstructive surgery and had lost all feeling in the left side of her face due to nerve damage. She suffered from PTSD as a result. He got a 2-year sentence, only served 9 months, wrote this wonderful letter about how he was a much better parent after having served 5 minutes in prison, okay? That it made him a better man and a better parent, and that he accepted responsibility, and he was sorry, and part of the abuse cycle. You say everything that people need to hear so that they get off your back, okay? Throw a few tears in there for emphasis. Those of us who need to believe that you have changed will eat that up, and we won't hold you accountable. He came out of prison after 9 months. He was hired by the city to be the director of business development for minority businesses. Being the fine example that he was after having beaten his wife nearly to death, okay? So he's working. They hired him. The mayor says, well, he's not a friend of mine, although records indicate that he supported his political aspirations in the past. All those ministers stood up and with their chest stuck out, singing his praises in court. Okay. The judge had a stack of letters on her desk from politicians, powerful people, other judges who came alongside. Let me tell y'all something. The fact that someone shares your vocation does not excuse them from hurting other people. The fact that they share your belief system does not excuse them from hurting other people. The fact that you may like them or I might like them and think they're amazing and a great conversationalist and have done great things in society does not make it okay for them to hurt and damage other people as long as it's not me. What is wrong with us? What is wrong with us? Okay? So there's no excuse for this. This is horrible and God is not pleased. We have got to do better. We've got to do better. So he gets hired. How does he show his thanks and gratefulness to all those people who stood up and defended him? He turns around and murders his wife. That's what he did, okay, in front of his children. After only serving 9 months. After starting a blog while he's in prison, talking about how, he's learning and he's growing or whatever. A seasoned therapist will tell you the depth of the rage and the anger that he unleashed on his wife is nothing to sneeze at, okay? Talking to me for 9 months, as amazing as I am as a clinician, is not going to fix that. Certainly not in a controlled environment. And the rage was unleashed upon Aisha back in 2014 because she said these words. Lance, I want you to get counseling before we reconcile. So even the suggestion that he needed help enraged him. Is that not a red flag? Is that not a red flag? I mean, it's just, we have to do better. It bothers me that this woman is dead. And he published an online self-help book. Okay. Again, this is horrible. Let me change the subject just for a second. Recently, there was an article published. There was a study that was conducted in Great Britain that talked about the 8 steps that an abuser takes. It's a pattern. They follow an 8-stage pattern according to this study that was released in Britain. And I want to share with you the steps that they have identified. And I want you to know that this applies to people even if you like them. Even if they're your BFF, even if they were your teacher in college, even if they're your family doctor, even if they have encouraged you in the past when you were going through, okay? Men who kill their partners follow a homicidal timeline that could be tracked by police to help prevent deaths. Criminology expert Dr. Jane Monckton Smith found an 8-stage pattern in 372 killings in the United Kingdom. Okay, so she studied 372 killings. She reviewed the killings that were discussed on the website Counting Dead Women, which is a website that originates, I believe, in the United Kingdom, and it keeps track of domestic violence instances. Controlling behavior could be a key indicator of someone's potential to kill their partner. So controlling behavior, and that's a common red flag. And it's often couched in, I'm trying to protect you. I want you to be safe. I don't want you to attract the wrong kind of attention. So I'm telling you what to dress. I'm telling you what to wear, what not to wear. I'm telling you how to wear your hair, how not to wear your hair. I'm telling you how to eat. I'm telling you, listen, let me tell y'all, a long time ago, this is about 20 years ago, I went on this date, right? We got Chinese food. I'm not making this up. This just popped into my head. All was well until that joker tried to tell me how to eat my fried rice. Oh no, you must put soy sauce on it. And I'm thinking, oh no, you're not going to see me again. That's crazy. This fried rice is going in my mouth. How are you telling me how I need to eat my own fried rice? And he was serious about it. I was like, oh no. This is a potential Fruit Loop. Deuces. That's exactly what I said. Asked me if I saw him again. No, I did not. So I share that to say that controlling behavior can show up in very subtle ways. Very, very subtle ways. And if you pay attention, they're trying to control things that they shouldn't be trying to control. Like what you eat and how you season the food that you eat. That was so weird that I could not ignore it. Couldn't ignore it. And I thought, this dude might have bodies in his basement or something. I don't know, but there's something wrong with him. There's something wrong with him, okay? All right, so controlling behavior is one indication. About 30,000 women globally were killed by current or former partners in 2017, okay? This is based on the study that the criminology expert did in Great Britain. Women account for more than 80% of victims killed by their partner, and most of the time the partner is male. Now, we know that it's not always the case that the partner is male, but most of the time the partner is male. Okay? So now here are the 8 steps. A pre-relationship history of stalking or abuse by the perpetrator. If someone wants to throw this up here, feel free. A pre-relationship history of stalking or abuse by the perpetrator, which means they have a history of this, okay? The romance developing quickly into a serious relationship, okay? And we've talked about this in the past, and it's called love bombing, where you are swept off of your feet and they're everything you ever dreamed of and all of that. Something's wrong with that, okay? Neither partner should feel rushed in a relationship. You shouldn't feel rushed or pressured, like your biological clock is ticking, or I should be married by now, or we know we love each other, why wait, or Christians shouldn't date for a long time, you should marry as soon as you know. Be careful that you're not being pulled into something that God never intended for you, okay? The relationship becoming dominated by coercive control, which is a lot of manipulation, veiled threats, using body language, using facial expression, using, withdrawing from you if you don't do what they want, rewarding you only when you do what they ask, okay? Number 4, a trigger that threatens the perpetrator's control. For example, the relationship ends or the perpetrator experiences financial hardship, okay? And this can happen in abuse cases, especially if they have served some prison time. And remember also I said that once you leave an abusive situation, that 30 to 90 day period is incredibly dangerous and you are not safe and you need a safety plan. Okay. Now, remember also that I've said in the past that if the perpetrator has been incarcerated, that 30 to 90 day period in reality doesn't truly begin for them until they are released, because now they're back out facing life on life's terms, and they're facing the fact that they've lost that relationship, okay? And power and control is the foundation of an abusive relationship. So they have a difficult time accepting that they've lost, all right? They have a very difficult time accepting that they have lost, all right? Number 5, escalation. An increase in the intensity or frequency of the partner's control tactics, such as stalking or threatening suicide. So understand that if the abuser begins to threaten suicide, if they're not concerned about their own life and their own existence, they have zero concern for yours or your children's or innocent bystanders or first responders, because they've decided that life has no value. Okay? All right? We're talking about the 8 steps that have been identified by an expert criminologist in Great Britain in a study that was just released about the 8 steps that when these things are present, you can pretty well assume that homicide is on the mind of the abuser. Okay? Number 6, the perpetrator has a change in thinking, choosing to move on either through revenge or by homicide. So, when you hear the term moving on, you may initially think, move on to another relationship, which often is the case. Move on to another area, move on to a different vocation or a different career or whatever. Okay, whoever's calling me, please hang up. But in the mind of the perpetrator, they cannot move on. If they are this far gone, they cannot move on unless the victim no longer exists. Then they can move on. They feel that they cannot move on while the victim is alive, and certainly not while the victim is pursuing another relationship or pursuing counseling and gaining their strength and getting their voice back. Okay, so moving on means that the victim no longer exists, so now I can go on with my life. Okay. Number 7, planning. The perpetrator might buy weapons or seek opportunities to get the victim alone. All right. And number 8 is the homicide itself. The perpetrator kills his or her partner and possibly hurts others, such as the victim's children. Now, I just want to add that non-physical abuse must be taken as seriously as physical abuse in terms of being a precursor to homicide. Understand also that victims, when they recount to you what they have experienced, if something is especially demeaning or shame-based, they may not even tell you to the extent that the abuse has occurred. They may not tell you how bad the abuse has been. They may minimize the frequency of the abuse. And so these are things that you want to keep in mind when you're even talking to a victim. I challenge you to think about being really honest when you're dealing with people who have engaged in these types of behavior, and search yourself and ask yourself, why am I harping the family must be together? Why am I harping that the children must see their mother or the children must see their father, no matter what they have done to the other parent? All right. Who are you doing that for? Who are you doing that for? Do you need to feel better? Why do you need to feel better? Address what you're feeling badly about, so that you're not sending people back into harm's way. Okay? 95% of women said they've never heard even a discussion about domestic violence across the pulpit of their local congregation, and that must stop. Okay? So we're going to wrap up there. I'm going to come back on and post the links to some of these videos so that you can see what I'm talking about. To recap, we've talked about former Judge Lance Mason and how in 2014 he brutally battered his wife in front of his children, punched her with a closed fist while driving in the car, proceeded to smash her head into the center console 5 times, attempted to choke her. He actually did bite her on the left side of her face. He left a huge bite mark on her face. She was able to get out of the car. He crawled across the console and across the passenger side of the seat, straddled her and continued to beat her in her face and told her, now your life is over. All of this with their 2 young children, one of which who has special needs, in the back seat of the car. Okay? She was picked up by some good Samaritans after he drove off with the kids. He was later arrested. The police responded to his home because he claimed that he was suicidal. They got a call that there was a man that was suicidal and he had a lot of weapons in the home. He had a lot of, firearms in the home. So they're responding for that. They get there. He's got her blood splattered all over his clothes. Okay. Then another call comes in that she's been beaten severely and she's on her way to the hospital. So he was arrested for that. Okay. He stood up in court. He accepted responsibility, gave a very moving speech about how sorry he was and how there's no excuse. The damage that he's caused to his children and to his wife is unforgivable. All of these clergy stood up and defended this man, talked about how amazing he was and how he deserved a second chance. And you had politicians, and you had other judges, and you had other co-workers, and you had a lot of clergy, bishops and apostles and pastors vouching for this man, despite what he had done to this woman, despite what he had done to her. Okay? And so we have to guard against doing this stuff because of our own ego. Okay? It's a tremendous power trip. It's a tremendous power trip, okay? If we're not submitted to God, we will put people in harm's way. We will put people in harm's way. And there's no real excuse for it because it's just really selfish and it's self-serving, okay? So he did all of that. He was sentenced to 2 years, which is a slap on the wrist still. You know, he done all this great things for the community. He got a 2-year sentence. He only served 9 months, which could have been expected because he's not a drug dealer. He's not a gangbanger. He's not, you know, a bank robber. So what kind of trouble was he going to get in prison? He's going to be quiet and behave, right? And be a model citizen and get out. That's exactly what he did. So he got out in 9 months. And not too long after that, oh, wait. So he beat her. And the reason that he beat her, right, was because he wanted to reconcile. They were separated during this time. He wanted to reconcile. And she said to him, I want you to get help. I want you to get some counseling before we get back together. And for this reason, he beat her nearly to death. Just the suggestion that he get counseling was enough to enrage him. Okay? Then everybody stands up and defends him. Church leaders, politicians, everybody's talking about how amazing he is, what an asset he's been to the community, etc., etc., etc. All right? So he does all of that. He gets out after 9 months. He gets hired by the city, who has a job application that doesn't even ask if you're a convicted felon. But they're proud of the fact that they have a second chance program because that makes us feel really good, right? We're not judging people. We're giving them a second chance. When in fact, what we're doing, if we don't do our due diligence, is unleashing them on the people that they feel put them in prison in the first place. Okay? So we're not saying that people should not be given a second chance, but we are saying that there should be a whole lot of accountability. And if you nearly killed someone, you might want to consider what kind of a role model you're setting them up to be. Okay? The argument is that he was the best qualified of 16 candidates. Well, duh. He was a judge. Kind of hard to compete with that, right? So if you're looking at education only and his ability to read contracts, maybe he was. But what about his character? What about all that? Okay? Surely there was someone else seeking that position who was seeking a second chance, who had not nearly killed someone in front of their children. Okay? So he murdered her while exchanging the kids. You know, she's bringing the kids to him to drop off at a neutral location. I believe it was her sister-in-law's house. He stabbed her to death. He stabbed her to death in front of the same 2 children that he said he could not believe he had beaten her in front of. So you better it by killing her in front of them. So now they've witnessed their mother being beaten nearly to death, needing reconstructive surgery, having post-traumatic stress disorder, having no feeling on the left side of her face because of nerve damage that he did when he beat her in her face. Okay? She goes to take the kids to visit him. Okay? Pretty sure that's court ordered. Our system is really jacked up. Okay? Neutral location, whatever. He murders her. And you can hear him on the videotape come back in the house and say, I'm sorry, she's dead. So that's, in a nutshell, what happened with this case. And again, everyone who has a tendency to vouch for someone who was downtrodden or who has made poor mistakes in life or whatever, seek God about it. There is no way the Lord wanted this man running loose out here. There's no way. And so all these people who are supposed to be able to hear from God, what happened? We've got to be careful about who we're listening to, folks. Okay? So I just want to challenge you to think about, and I don't want us to become desensitized to these cases and to think, well, okay, you know what? I'm thinking about this is horrible. This is really bad. Oh my God. And then we go back to our life. We don't do anything about it. We do nothing about it. So the purpose of these lives is to challenge each of us to think about the people around us and to think about being better, helpers one to another. Okay? Understanding the dynamics of domestic violence, understanding that when a victim says, oh no, that's okay, I don't want to press charges, that is standard, typical post-traumatic thought process. You cannot put a lot of weight on that. You cannot. They're not thinking clearly. Okay? And so, tune in next week. We'll be back on next week. We are planning to start traveling globally next year. We have accepted ministry engagements in Kenya so far and in the South Pacific, in Solomon Islands. And we're open to that because this is a global problem. We have some other plans also regarding domestic violence, and we'll update you on those in the near future as soon as we have those finalized, because we are committed to raising awareness. We have established a closed Facebook group, Dominion Over Domestic Violence. You can find us on Facebook and you can apply to join the group. I'm vetting everyone that comes in there because we're committed to ensuring that it's a safe environment for everyone who participates, okay? We don't want you to come in and just be a looky-loo. We'll let you do that for a little while, but the idea is that we are in covenant relationships, so we exchange strength for weakness. That means we're an encouragement to one another. We're a sounding board for one another. It's a safe place to share your story. It's a judgment-free zone. If you are a ministry leader, you are certainly welcome because there needs to be a place where you can come and share as well. And if you want to come because you want to lend support to others, that's amazing. We welcome you. And if once you get in the group, you decide, you know what, I came to help other people, but I'm finding out I need some help myself. That's okay too. That's okay too, all right? So the name of the group is Dominion Over Domestic Violence. We offer domestic violence courses. We're in the process of developing a course that we can set up for a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, 5 day type thing, and bring it to your local congregation to either educate and make aware your entire congregation or do a focus training for your ministry team so that they are better equipped to detect and discern and to respond appropriately when domestic violence raises its ugly head in your congregation or in your organization, okay? This is Apostle Cheryl Richardson. We appreciate you tuning in today. Please feel free to share. If you want to support us, partner with us regarding raising awareness, our Cash App is Judah's Roar. You can find it at the top of the broadcast, and our PayPal is paypal.me/Judah's Roar. All right? We love you, and God bless you.